this on?
Hello, everyone. This is the image panel, just to be clear where you are. My name is Robin Brenner, and I'm a local librarian, and I've been a comics librarian for about 15 years, so know that that's a job you can have. And I'm here just to moderate the panel this afternoon, and I just wanted to introduce everybody quickly. Hopefully you all know who you're here for, but so first, of course, we have Erik Larsen, who's the creator of Savage Dragon. And then Mike Norton is the artist on Revival. And then Sina Grace is self-obsessed and a little depressed boy. And Nick Dragata, who's the East of West, excuse me. And then again we have Leila Del Duca, who is the artist for Shutter and Afar. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to start off with a bunch of my own questions, and then we'll have time for questions about 20 minutes in, and we'll go back and forth from there. So my first basic question was, I was just thinking about how Image has been around for, it's 24 years at this point, almost 25. And I wondered if you guys could just talk about how it's changed from the beginning, and then just for you guys, what your kind of perspective has been over your careers of how things have changed in the industry, both good and bad.
Well, let me tell you about the bad stuff, because that's the more fun part.
I guess, right? I mean,
Well, you were the only one there at the
here
beginning.
from the so, sorry, guys. You were out of luck.
No, I mean, when it started, it was 6 or 7 of us all leaving Marvel and starting our own comic book company. And initially, we were part of Malibu Comics, so they kind of had the infrastructure that was there. And then a year later, we kicked those guys to the curb and just took over and did our own thing. But it was a very different animal because we were all kind of doing superhero stuff and we were doing a shared universe. And you know, we were high-profile guys all coming off of high-profile books over at Marvel. So it was kind of an extension of what we were doing over at Marvel to a degree. And now it's anything goes. It's kind of all over the place. So it's really changed as creators have come along, because they're like, we can do anything we want. Well, then I don't want to do this crazy thing. And sometimes it's awesome, and sometimes people will come up with stuff that you go, God, you know, it would really been nice if you would have done something with a logo that I could read. Or something, you know, I mean, there's just some basic skills that should have been part of it, but there's some really great books that are coming out through Image, so I'm happy as can be at this point.
Erik, was it always conceived as a shared universe, or just the nature of it, you guys?
Well, I think we were just kind of going, let's do kind of what we were doing. And I think we all grew up loving superheroes, and so that was what we wanted to do. And it just seemed like, here's a way where we could kind of cross-promote each other's books. Your character can appear in my book, and mine can appear in yours, and we can kind of go back and forth with it. And there's still some of that to a degree, because, you know, like Invincible will sometimes pop over into Savage Dragon, or I'm doing a crossover with Spawn, because I'm drawing Spawn and Savage Dragon at the same time. So I was able to kind of, sort of as my swan song, as I'm going out the door on Spawn, we're doing a big crossover.
Erik, is it true that
Spotlight on.
that Savage Dragon has been going on since the very beginning, and that's the only title, or is that
No, Spawn has also been going on since the beginning.
Cool. Are there any other titles besides Spawn and Savage Dragon that are still ongoing from the beginning?
No, not from the beginning.
Cool. I think that's cool.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of things have kind of come and gone. DC Comics sort of acquired Jim Lee and everything that's part of Jim Lee. And so he's been absorbed in the board over there. And then Rob kind of comes and goes in terms of his stuff. But for the most part, yeah, most guys have just kind of wandered off to do something else. which is fine. I mean, I'm kind of weird in that most people aren't sitting there going, I got a story I want to tell and it's going to take me 30 years. You know, most people aren't like that. Most people are like, I got this finite thing, I want to go from A to B, and that's going to be great. And that's completely fine too.
Are we going in order, or can we all be like?
You can
Just jump in,
Yeah,
dude.
it's more fun if it's a
Anything you want to
conversation.
say, but you just have to ask me a question.
So Eric, my answer to that question is a question to you. No, but one thing that's interesting about Image now, because I interned at Top Cow in high school, and they were a part of Image. They are again, right? They go in and out. Mark goes in and out of his, like how much he's bound. That's a question for you, but we don't have to talk about that now. Anyway, but at the time, you know, if Image was taking a risk, it wasn't immediately, like, there wasn't this like blind interest that there is nowadays. Like the marketplace, when you see the Image eye, both retailers and fans are like, I'm curious, like, what's next, to quote the company. But once upon a time, there was a period where the marketplace didn't have that for Image, and that's what I could say is the difference now is there's that trust in an overall brand identity that they're going to give these creators an opportunity to let their imaginations go wild, and like Eric said, sometimes to great success.
Yeah,
Saga.
sometimes not. I mean, there's times where when Jim had left Image, there was a period there where we're like, we need to get a bunch of new books in here today in order to make this work. And there was some stuff that came up on board, which was not really the sort of thing that we should have been publishing. And so, you know, that happens sometimes.
My first published work was with Image in the late 90s when you guys were doing when Jen was running stuff, and it was the big black and white anything, publish anything and everything days. So, some of those worked out, not many of them, but I think that was kind of a precursor to what it is now, though, because there were so many out there kind of projects, and it wasn't all superheroes. And
No, I think it's cool.
Yeah.
I like that there's a bunch of different stuff. I gotta say, I do miss some of the shared universe
Sure.
stuff. And I on my own, just when I'm talking with other creators, it's always like, yeah, if you're doing an Image book and you want to use Savage Dragon in your book, take them.
Wait, for real?
Yeah, no. If you want Savage Dragon showing up in Little Depressed Boy or something.
What about my memoir?
Yeah, no, they can just be like, he can be just sitting there doing whatever.
There's a drink and draw tonight.
There
Let's have
you
it.
go.
Well, I was going to ask you guys how you ended up at Image. The rest of you kind of tell a little bit of your stories, but you've already done that a little bit. But does anyone else? How did you end up choosing Image as the place you wanted to be?
For me, it was kind of just out of necessity, and I'm really thankful to like come of age now with my own work during this new boom at Image, because I was at Marvel and I had done about 10 years there, and I was always kind of like C/B list. And I worked my way up, and I started doing Fantastic Four and FF with Jonathan Hickman. And I remember I was like, I think now's the time to ask for a raise. And they were like, there's no way. So I was just kind of like, I'm grinding away. I'm not making that much money. It was okay, but it was nothing you could support a family on in the Bay Area. And so Jonathan was doing Manhattan projects, and we were just like, let's go do an Image book. And it hit, and it's like, it's life-changing. So, I mean, thanks for starting the company. What a lot of people don't understand is like an Image book that sells high teens, low 20s, that changes the creators' lives on that book, and then the trade sales, and you know, so.
Yeah, no, early on it was super like, I'm gonna go buy a house, you know.
Oh, I've heard the stories.
No,
Of guys who do
it's-
a book and take off for 6 months.
Yeah, no, they would just
travel the
vanish. You'd
world.
go, great. This guy just handed this guy.
disappeared.
But owning your work is key to survival in this industry. That's what I've learned anyway, and I'm really thankful for guys like Eric and the original creators for starting this company. It's one of the greatest experiences in all of publishing I've had, and I've worked with major publishers like HarperCollins and all the different companies, and there's nothing like Image, owning your work and controlling every aspect of it. So.
Yeah, I kind of lucked out. The first major publisher that I worked for is Image, and right from the get-go, like their team is so amazing. The way they printed our books and like the choice that they let us make on our own title was amazing. Yeah, I feel really lucky to like have been able to dive right into creator-owned through Image specifically because I think their team is amazing. But to answer your question, I got into comics through Joe Keating, who's been writing for Image for a couple years before he met me at New York City Comic Con 2012. And he was the only writer who was like paying attention to my work and actually liked it. And so I, of course, plagued him with emails and was like, please, I want to work with you. Glory was awesome. And yeah, then he pitched Shudder to me and I was like, yeah, I would have done anything, but this sounds great anyway. So that's how I got in.
You want to go?
Well, I mean, I started at Image back in the 90s with, I was doing Mike Barron's Batman.
Oh yeah, I heard this. Okay.
Yeah. And then I went and did Marvel and DC for a long time, and now I'm back there doing my own thing. So I took the long way around.
I was doing a webcomic called The Little Depressed Boy, which is another way to own the rights to your creation and still have people read it, the internet. And then when we had enough to make like this version of a comic, a floppy in your hands, I printed them myself and I handed one to Eric Stevenson. What is he, the EIC? What is his name,
I
title?
don't know, he's a publisher.
He's the publisher of Image Comics. I just went straight.
Was he the publisher at that point, or was I the publisher at that point?
It was, I think that you were, it was Eric, because it was when I was at Skybound. Oh yeah, that's the other thing, is I had a little bit of a foot in, but that all being said, I showed him because I was like, oh, how do I like find this a home? Because I thought it was going to go to Oni, and he looked at it and he's like, oh, I'll let you know, and if I like it, I'll publish it. And then like months go by and he's not texting me, he's messaging me about like the lettering, and I was like, does this mean you're gonna publish it? And like he wasn't answering, and then I was like, no, does this mean you're gonna publish it? And he's like, I don't know how to make it more clear to you, like I'm gonna publish it.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, if you've met the man, it tracks. And yeah, from there, that you know, again, like everyone has said, if you can handle the highs and lows and the work that comes with like doing images, you have to do everything. You gotta know a lot of things. I'll shut my mouth, but if you can pull it off, it's really nice and rewarding and gratifying.
Kind of related to what you just said, actually, I was wondering about the difference between when you decide, because of the internet has obviously changed a ton about the comics industry. How do you decide when to start something as a webcomic versus going to print? And is that a progression, or is it just kind of deciding this one belongs here and this one belongs here?
I don't think there's any one route for any of that stuff. I mean, a lot of people go and do webcomics just because it's so immediate and there's nobody you have to run anything by. You just go, I drew this today, bam, here you go. And that's a real easy way. I mean, getting somebody to look at your stuff for pre-internet was kind of difficult, and now it's pretty easy. And if you can do any kind of decent work at all, it is not that difficult to get it in front of people's faces and get some reactions from people, and then it's just a matter of networking. So, I mean, some people have had a tough time making a living doing stuff through the internet because it's not always, the money's not always there.
Yeah.
But guys figured that out too, so.
Yeah, I did a webcomic for 5 years called Battle Pug, and I did that because exactly what Eric said, because I wanted to do it now, and I didn't want to ask a publisher to, hey, does this sound like a good idea, and then wait for a while, and I just wanted to put it up there. And it's the weird thing about the internet is that I've had more readers with that than I have anything I've published, but I haven't made any money off of it because it's a webcomic.
That's how that works.
Yeah, so it was just a gratification thing. It wasn't a get rich thing. It was it was the first thing I had written myself, and I just wanted to put it out there.
Do you guys find more people come into the company from the web at this point? Do you get more recognition that way?
I don't know anymore right now.
Yeah, at this point?
I'm sure
just
a lot of
curious.
people are found there.
Yeah.
Oh, there's an awful lot.
Yeah.
There are writers who will be like, I'm cruising Pencil Jack right now trying to find somebody to draw my book.
I think teams are built on the internet. Like,
Mm.
Definitely.
I have found artists on Instagram, you know, some people are like, oh, it's all about the DM, and they mean it in a not savory fashion, but like, and mine is all just like networking and connecting, like, hey, you wanna draw this thing? But yeah, I think all the submissions are people who are trying to make comics the traditional route, and I don't know, what do you guys think? Because you did how-tos, wasn't that web first?
No, that was online for free. It's an educational comic for kids that don't know about it. But yeah, we were just putting them online for free, and then a publisher did notice us from that. That was HarperCollins, and then they published a book for that, and then eventually ended up in Image like 10 years later. But it's just a way, to me, to get something seen, produced, and put it out, you know.
Well, Elvis, one thing I always appreciate is that I think of Image as a place where there's all kinds of genre. There's every possible kind of book, which is not true necessarily of other publishers. You don't always get that full range. So I wondered if there is anything you guys, one that you're happy with what you're doing now, but is there anything you're thinking of that would be kind of outside the box that you're hoping to try at some point? Or anything you want to talk about that's upcoming?
Yeah, I don't think my next book is gonna sell at all. 'Cause it's just about, I mean, and per like a book called The Little Depressed Boy, I'm like, well, if you like that, this one's called Nothing Lasts Forever. So, but you know, that's nice. Is Image is like, well, like you want to do it, so therefore you see something in it, and you want to spend 2 years on it. So they have faith, and then on top of that, you get essentially all the control you want in how the book comes out and is made. Obviously, they'll tell you like that's way too expensive, no. If it's, you know, you're like, oh, it's hardcover and it's gonna be made entirely of like leather. I don't know. Clearly, I'm not at my best today, but yeah, even that, I'm like, oh, I want it to be this size and this paper, and you know, it's a risk. It's like cheaper than just the way most books look, and Image is like, yeah, okay, like. If you think it's gonna work, then
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a really cool thing to be able to make those kinds of decisions. When you're doing stuff at some other company, they're definitely looking at the bottom line, but if it's your book and you're saying, well, I want this issue of my comic to be square bound, and it's like, well, that's gonna cost you another couple $1,000s, and you're like, I don't care, because I love it.
Yeah.
And you can just do stupid stuff like that.
And my favorite thing, I mean, within the monthly is you have 32 pages to play with. Normally you guys expect 20, but I know like with a fight scene, I can blow it out to 8 pages rather than like Jonathan might have written as 2. And the best thing about Image is no ads. You can push all the ads out where you put them in the back. I mean, that's one of my biggest gripes when I pick up a DC or Marvel book and you come across a pajama ad in the middle.
Well, also just knowing what's going to be a left-hand page and what's going to be a
True.
right page.
Yeah, just dictating the
Is
pace
just
of the
a
read.
miracle, you know? Because the whole storytelling of the left to right flip and just going, I want this to be continued on the right page, and then and then Dr. Doom shows up, and it's like, yeah, well, we've got ads this month, and so now Dr. Doom is completely spoiled.
Well, now they
Sorry.
run ads that look like the comic too.
Yeah.
Like they're
Oh,
drawn
right.
by the artists and they're placed in there, and you start reading an ad and you're
that
like,
Luke Cage ad right now in all the Marvel books. I mean, hey, Dale Keown's really good, but every time I'm like, oh, there's a second artist. But that's cool, and you can help your friends out. None of my books would sell if it wasn't for like emailing everyone, being like, can I get an ad? And then being like, no. We'll tweet about you.
To get back to your original question,
Oh.
I personally want to work on a romance comic next, and I've been talking to Sarah Vaughn from Alex and Ada, so I hope we can develop something there with someone. And then I personally want to see more diverse autobio comics from people. I think that would be really awesome.
It's a
Yeah,
nice
that's
one,
super-
yeah.
oh.
It's just me being sad for like 150 pages.
I love it.
I'm writing a comic about, it's like Howard the Duck if he was Doctor Strange and he's actually a pug and he's solving his own murder. But I don't know if Image is gonna say yeah to that. We'll see.
I'll do whatever the hell I want. I don't care. No, it's cool, but there's also stuff where we'll do anthologies, and so they'll be like, hey, we need 3 pages, what do you got? And I'll be like, how about Reggie the Veggie? He'll just sits in this, he doesn't do anything. It's like, oh, that sounds awesome. Okay, cool. So whenever I have a few pages that somebody needs, I'll do some weird thing, and it's like, oh, I got that out of my system. I only had 1 page of Mickey Mouse to begin with. So just do that.
I'm gonna go for one more question, and then we can open up, so if people are, want to start lining up. If you have questions, I think we'll do the microphone just so people can hear what's asked. Or you can ask me and I'll relate the question. But I did want to ask, in terms of all of you having to also balance everything you do, there's obviously the creative work, but then there's this kind of expectation now of having interactions with your fans and doing stuff online and doing your own PR. Like, how do you do that? And is there a good, is there a balance you can find, or is that something that you kind of are always working to figure out?
I feel like I don't need to have the social networking thing that I have, because Image is already so good at distributing and advertising and promoting our book that I think I could just not exist on the internet and it wouldn't cost us very many sales at all. So I don't feel a huge obligation to do that, but I do love connecting with fans on like Twitter and Instagram. I feel like those are the easiest ones for me to stick with.
You go.
I'll fill the space, the air. I try and follow people who I think are cool on the internet, because like some people you see and you're like, oh man, like can you not hashtag every like permutation of everything on every post? And it's cool, but sometimes it's like exhausting when an account is just utterly professional. So like I look at like, oh, it's like, oh, how do my favorite musicians do it? And like toe the line between like personal and professional. Sarah Jessica Parker, I like her Instagram a lot. I think she does a good job. But I find it necessary just because I do really specific things, and you have to like engage each person and find them other, like I don't, it's not like cool pug thing with Doctor Strange, like that, like everyone wants to buy that. I'm like, oh, it's me, you just gotta kind of figure out if you want to have me in your house. So I need the social media to like find anyone who would listen, but then at the same time I don't want to come off like a weenie, so I find people who I think do it right, and then I'm like, yeah, that's cool, I'll do it your way, and then I don't tell them.
Yeah, I find it to be a necessity as well. I try to be as accessible and show everything and anything. And I have a lot of followers for some reason. I don't know if it necessarily translates into readers or sales, but I know that people are looking at something.
Wow.
But it has, I do think it has helped as far as at least getting my name out there so that I can continue to keep getting jobs. So.
I wonder how many people are just kind of following stuff and reading comics vicariously, sort of living through.
Yeah.
They're not actually reading comics,
Yeah,
but they're like,
no.
I just like to hear what Bill Sienkiewicz
Yeah,
has to
they
say
feel-
himself. Is that guy
Well,
cool?
that's part, I think that's part of the social media advertising, is that you're not necessarily even advertising the thing that you do anymore. You're advertising, hey, hang out with Mike for a while. See what he had for dinner. It's like, but why? That's not interesting. But that seems to be kind of what a lot of people do. And it's like, well, if you're interested in that, I make this comic book. Maybe you'll go buy that someday. So,
Yeah, you hope. But it's weird when you look at your Twitter thing and you go, I've got 6 times as many followers as I do readers.
Yeah,
This is
that's exactly, yeah. I've said that before too, I've tweeted a couple of times, it's like, if everybody that follows me went out and bought my comic, I wouldn't complain about people not buying my comic. And, that doesn't work either.
All right, do you want to go ahead?
Pardon me. My question is about other media outside of comics, TV and film in particular.
Yep.
And we've seen Image have huge success with things like The Walking Dead and of course Spawn in the past. And my question is what is Image see as the future for that? And are there any current plans for new properties? And from the stuff that you guys are working on right now, and what's going on with the other media?
Well, here's how that works at Image. Everybody owns their own stuff. And that means everything. They own their own media rights. So Image Comics itself is not out there selling The Walking Dead. It's Robert Kirkman and his group that are out there selling The Walking Dead. So if I want there to be Savage Dragon stuff, that's on me. And I go out and do that. Image doesn't share in that. Image doesn't see a dime from that Walking Dead show. And a dime would have been really nice. But we don't. And that's just part of who we are and how we operate. And that everybody owns their own stuff entirely, and Image Comics doesn't own a piece of anybody's anything.
Hello? How would you sort of say, it's definitely a different experience for everyone, but what would you say is along the basis of kind of breaking into independent comics, whether it's through Image or with webcomics, you could just post it through Facebook like every single week, but what would you say is usually kind of sort of the standard learning curve that people go through to the point that like Image kind of calls them up and says, hey, you want to write this thing that you have an idea for? Or
mostly people who want to get into Image and want to do something with Image will send it into Image and say, here's this cool thing I'm doing, look. And sometimes it'll be a link, and sometimes it'll be, they'll send a physical, I printed up my own comic, and here it is, kind of stuff. And there's been a few people who've come just completely blind submission. We pick out of the heap, hey, here's,
Luther Strode, that's a blind submission.
yeah, that's a, the Luna Brothers doing Ultra, that was a blind thing.
Hickman
Hickman was a blind one. Yeah, so a number of them are just.
so it's like American Idol, except instead of being insulted, you just get like a silent stare where no one
Yes,
ever
you get a
responds.
silence. And it's
Excellent.
not like American Idol in that in American Idol there was always going to be a winner. At Image Comics, if 10 people submit awesome comics, we're publishing 10 awesome comics. If 0 people do, we're publishing 0. There's no commitment on Image's part like we have to do 10 comics from the slush pile this year. It's entirely if they're good. And the other part of it is we're actively pursuing people that we know do good work. And then there's the slush pile, and sometimes there's awesome stuff in there, and quite frequently there is not.
Another way that I feel like people can go about it is kind of what my route and what I've heard other people go through. Like I did the blind submission to Image for another title, and my stuff frankly wasn't good enough, and I just don't think it was a very good project in hindsight. But a year or so later, I met Joe Keating, who already has an in at Image. Like he's already trusted as making amazing work. And then he trusted in me as an artist, and so I got to work with him, and that's kind of another route. Like if you find a team who believes in your work and you're good enough, then I think that's a way to get into Image as well.
And some people will do things like the back of a lot of comics. If you look at them, they'll be like, hey, here's a 6-page story that's in the back of this comic or that. Rather than run ads, I'd prefer to run 6 pages of random guy just doing his own stuff and just put that in the back of my book. You don't get paid anything for doing it, but it's there, and then you're like, hey, remember this thing that you saw in the back of this book for a couple months? There's a familiarity. And then also, you're building a trust with not only your audience, but your publisher to go, oh, this guy actually will do the work. Not like a bunch of other people who, I mean, for a lot of artists, right, the way to get them to stop bugging you to give them work is to give them a script, and then you never hear from them again. And that's fairly frequent that I'll do this. I've sent off a few scripts to artists who I've never heard from again. That was the end of it. And because a lot of guys, they just freeze up, they can't get their act together or whatever.
And to add a little like nuance to all of this, like what you do leading up to that also speaks to the opportunities that will come to you. Like there are people who are just, they keep, like first they'll make the zine and they go to, you know, FedEx Kinko's and they hand do it. Then, and they're doing it themselves. Like Bendis, he was drawing his own comics until finally someone was like, you need to stop, because I don't want to read this. And even Hickman drew some of his own
Yeah,
stuff.
Hickman started, his first book was.
And you kind of have to keep leveling up, you know, like Pokemon Go, you know, like you got to get to a certain level before you can do this thing. And
Gotta catch 'em all.
I'm gonna wear my Pikachu shirt tomorrow.
I mean,
But
most of these guys, they have to produce, is the thing. If
You have
you're
to
not
prove it.
producing anything, then you're never gonna make it.
yeah, I always say Ed Brisson, he's an Image Comics and a Marvel Comics writer. He really, when I was an editor, he really impressed me just by having an immaculately set up table at a convention, and he had like 2 comics and a zine, but everything looked really clean and professional. And I was just like, this guy knows what he's doing. This looks like he already is a mainstream writer, and he actually was just fooling everyone because he'd only written about maybe 70 pages altogether, you know? But it didn't matter because he came at it and he invested, and all of that just proves like, okay, you want that guy, you want to work with that guy because that guy's going to come correct. So that's sort of, yeah, it's a very complicated answer, but like, come correct. That's the long and the, just do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, you do, you have to do it. Also, you get better if you just do it. You know, if you're just waiting around for your opportunity, you're not gonna have that learning curve. Yeah, I never would have given early me work at all, because I was terrible. But I just kept producing and producing and producing work to the point where it's like, all right, you've worked through all these things that were terrible problems, and now you can do this stuff. Off you go.
Thank you.
All right?
Howdy. So I got a question, and I guess it sort of relates to sort of the work ethic and also coming correct, so to speak. So for people going through the application process, and, you know, I look at a lot of Image Comics, and, you know, I'll see, you know, 2 up to 5 names, and sometimes on a project. Is it a big red flag when you see a proposal and you realize that this person is going to do everything, if it's a solo project?
No, not at all.
Again, if the work is good, and it's probably easier to market if it's one person.
Yeah. What's it like to sort of have accountability as someone working on a project for Image Comics?
Wait, did you have something to add to that?
Oh, I was just gonna say that Ron Wimberly is a perfect example of a one-man team that Image is super psyched about. This stuff is coming out currently and will in the future.
I think the best comics are done by one person, you know? so-
My last book was on me too. Yeah, so I feel good. But what else did you say? You can ask-
Oh, well, I guess my other question is sort of like, you know, as a publisher, how do you interact with your, you know, your artists and whatnot who are working on these projects to sort of like make sure that they're really executing on it? Like, is it a very hands-off process?
It's very hands-off.
Yeah.
It is really hands-off, yeah.
Depends how much you're paying them. If you're not, then you just gotta be polite and wait it out. But if there's money on the table, then there should be a contract on the table, and then there should be rules on the table. But yeah.
How much does Image bug you to get your work done?
Oh, sorry, from the publishing end, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought he meant as a creator working with artists, sorry. Oh, yeah, no, I get cajoled when I'm a bad boy, but
I'll get an email or two being like, are you gonna get in this week? Is that
yeah,
happening?
they let you know if you're compromising sales by doing stuff like that. They do, that much at least.
So no like Faustian contracts or anything like that?
Sorry, they don't do that. No, I meant between creators amongst themselves. I misunderstood your question. Delete anything I said.
I got what you mean.
But I mean, the key to making money in this business, and especially creator, is being on the shelves. You have to produce. So like that's one thing I've learned is to let it go. I used to try and be a perfectionist about everything, and now it's just like I kind of dive into that and be like, well, this is who I am right now. Let's just get it out and get it done, you know. And
Get it right.
you look back on it, and you're like, it's wasn't that bad. It's okay, you know. Don't overthink it. Just produce, produce, produce. And like we were saying, it's a learning curve. You'll look back and be embarrassed for the stuff you did a decade ago.
No matter what.
Maybe not Eric.
No, I'm there.
Killing it.
I'm there. I got skeletons in my closet.
All right, thank you so much, really appreciate it.
Hey guys, I was just wondering what some of your influences were, be it comics, movies, TV, I don't know, stuff that inspired you when you were younger, just starting out.
Can I go first? Because Mark Schultz is here at the convention this weekend, and I haven't met him yet, but he's like one of my all-time favorite comic book artists, so I would say he's an influence. Yeah, after I got that out of the way, what else have I got? Visit him. I don't know what his booth number, but look him up, he's amazing.
But what about mainstream for you? Because I see some Mark Schultz, sure, in your style. Also, you have those Peanuts pages on display, but like, what else for you? Oh, that's Joel Schultz. I'm an idiot. Sorry.
No, it's all right.
I'm done.
Oh, no, wow. Well, mainstream, I'll mention Sean Murphy. Like, he's also a huge stylist.
I've been on a bus for 5 minutes.
Nick, what about you?
Well, for me, it was early Image, no doubt. Like when I was around 16, 17, so I copied every Larson, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane, both back then. And then
So old.
I'm lucky because then and then I like hated comics for a bit after art school because there's just nothing in my 20s and 30s. It was just like a void. I would go to the shop and not really like anything. And in my 30s, I discovered manga, and now I'm like, I just love it. And me and Robin were talking about Naoki Urasawa, those 20th Century Boys, Pluto, but you name it. I mean, I love good manga. I love the action. I like the writer artist and the way they pace their comics. So, like now, I'm like a 16-year-old again. When I was reading Image, I'm like pulling a lot of that work into my stuff and trying to learn from it. So.
Are we going in order? I used to be like a Top Cow guy. I loved Michael Turner, and I love X-Men. So like Joe Madureira and Chris Bachalo or whatever, they were cool. And then I worked at a comic store and found out about all the indie people, and I really like Dan Clowes and Marjan Satrapi and Craig Thompson. And there's a bunch of new people coming out now that are better than me, and it makes me feel weird, But yeah, all of that. I look at everything. I like, and yeah, it's European comics are really cool. Black Sad, that like messed me up for a few weeks because I was like, Raphael Albuquerque, he's really good.
That's very good. You are saying true things. My major things that make me draw comics when I was a kid was Star Wars, John Romita Sr. and John Byrne. And those were the things that made me want to make comics. And they pretty much haven't changed. I've added a lot of things since then, but those are the bedrock in which all comics for me are made. There's a lot of other, I went through a huge Mike Barango phase in the 90s. I'm sure a lot of people did too. But yeah, early Kamiko and Matt Wagner and Badger Volume 1, you know, that kind of stuff, Nexus and all that crap. All that is the soup in which I live.
There you go. Yeah, mine's all Jack Kirby and Walt Simonson and Frank Miller and John Byrne. Just kind of everything, and just kind of absorb a little bit from everybody.
Cool, thanks, Zach.
So, a few months ago, we just finished publishing, or self-publishing, two of our own stories. We're planning to submit one of them to Image, hopefully right after Boston. So, looking for some, like, if we all have one tip of advice for the submission process, we should keep in mind when we submit, what would that be?
A crisp, clean $50 bill.
There's an FAQ, follow the rules, like, just like,
It's really simple, and just keep it simple, don't overthink it, you know? I would say less is always better, because, you know, if you're writing a 3-4 page thing that's just rambling going on about, oh, I really love Image Comics and Jimmy was my favorite, and all that, that is not gonna do you any good at all. Just say, here's my comic, hope you like it. That's it. You don't need to see character breakdowns or any of that stuff. If you have a very basic elevator pitch of this is what it's all about, bam, put that in there, but don't get too long-winded. Nobody wants to read too much.
yeah, and I don't think people like being stage managed in terms of their like emotional arc, like you need to have this book in your roster because it's gonna be the most like how do you know? Like, what are you talking about? And then also, yeah, like, keep it simple in that, like, I don't remember where the story happened, but someone told me that they had received a shoe with a submission, with a note that said, trying to get my foot in the door. But hey, what did anyone remember from that story? Not the content of the, of the submission itself, just, you know what I mean? So like, just strong work, succinct, messaging, and yeah, just do your best and follow the rules.
And nobody's gonna reject an awesome book because you misspelled Eric Stevenson's last name, Nobody, it's all this stuff. If it's a good book, we want to publish it. If it's a terrible book, there's nothing you can say to make us publish your terrible book.
Yeah, I think, my piece of advice would be your own worst critic. Like, look at the line and say, can my book sit on the shelf with these other books? From every aspect, from like graphic design, to how it's packaged and branded, to the art, to the writing. And then also, is it different? Like, is it bringing something? Because that's one thing I hear Eric say a lot, like, I'm not interested in another zombie book. They got that. They want new ideas. Just bring it, like, make us all go, holy shit, who's this guy? I want to read this book. So don't try and follow someone. Bring something new.
We're actually pretty much at the end of our time. Do we have time for one more?
Thank you, good luck.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right.
You're it, man.
One more question.
Make it
Great.
good. Pressure.
Yeah. So one of the most generic questions you'll probably ever get asked. What is it like, or what is the steps you took to get from kid in your room drawing comics to professional? Like, what were the hours you put in each day?
This is gonna be a long, sad story for you.
I mean, the word, everything, right? Like, you do everything.
I didn't have a social life as a teenager. I went to art school and was like the dork that wanted to draw it's like not a choice. You just have to do it. And you sacrifice, like Alex Coe said it the best, comics are a cruel mistress. I have a family with 2 kids, and when I'm on deadline, I'm spending time with my mistress. You know what I'm saying? Like, you want to get your book out and you're just cranking away, and I love what I do. Like, I just love it. And then, I take some time off, hang out with the family, and then I go right back at it. Like, you just devote yourself to it. And,
I stopped playing video games at PlayStation 2, but because I was just like, I could do this or I could learn to draw better. And I apprenticed under a comic artist. I worked at a comic store. I got portfolio reviews from everyone except for him because he's very, very honest. So if you want to actually find out, he'll let you know. I'm scared. It's even in my next book. I'm like, I won't go to Eric because I don't want to know. I don't want to know.
I feel like even though you do have to work your butt off a lot, I think there is a point where if you are fast enough and know yourself and how you treat your craft well enough, that a social life is manageable after you've got a steady job as a comic book artist. Like, I work between 4 to 6 hours a day on regular schedule when I haven't picked up an extra gig just for the hell of it. So I feel, but I did also sacrifice my social life during college years and afterwards. Working a 40-hour work week and then having to draw comics on top of that is awful and annoying, but it's totally worth it. It's really cool once you get there.
I mean, I drew a ton of comics as a little kid.
Great, I think we're officially at time, so we're gonna have to clear the room, but thank you guys very much, that was great.